All right, let's get right into it. Today we're looking at the very first rebellion against the brand new Tudor dynasty. And what's so fascinating is how it proves that the echoes of a war can haunt a kingdom long, long after the last battle is supposedly won. So you know the story, right? The Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485. That's where most textbooks just close the chapter on the Wars of the Roses. Henry Tudor beats Richard III, the House of Lancaster wins, and poof, a new dynasty is born. But what if that wasn't really the end of the story? What if the war didn't actually stop, but just changed its shape? I mean, picture this. It's 1486. Henry's been king for barely a year. The crown is still new, his dynasty feels, well, a little fragile. And suddenly, that fragile piece is about to be totally shattered. And we're not talking about some minor riot here. This was a direct, serious challenge to his very right to be on the throne. To really get this rebellion, you have to understand the mood of the country at the time. I mean, sure, the big battles might have stopped, but all those loyalties, all those old grudges that fueled 30 years of brutal civil war, they were still simmering right under the surface. The hard truth was Henry VII's claim to the throne was, let's be honest, it was pretty thin. He basically won it by conquest. So for a lot of powerful people who were loyal to the defeated House of York, he wasn't their rightful king at all. He was a usurper. And the Yorkists, well, they might have been beaten on the battlefield, but they were a long, long way from being extinct. So who are these guys? Who was bold enough to actually challenge a brand new king? Well, let's meet the leaders of this first Tudor rebellion. And you gotta understand, these weren't just some random, disgruntled nobles. No, these guys were the absolute heart of the old Yorkist regime. The main man, the ringleader, was Lord Francis Lovell. He was one of Richard III's closest friends and advisors, so for him, this was deeply personal. He's joined by the Stafford brothers, Humphrey and Thomas, who were big-time landowners in the Midlands. These weren't some fringe players. They were central figures from the government that had just been kicked out, and they were driven by a fierce loyalty to their fallen king. And their goal was total. This wasn't some kind of protest to get a better deal from the new king. No way. This was a full-blown dynastic power play. They wanted to kick Henry Tudor right off the throne and put a pure-blooded Yorkist there instead, the young Edward, Earl of Warwick, who was the nephew of two Yorkist kings. So how did Henry deal with this threat that just wouldn't go away? Well, even before the rebels started gathering their forces, Henry pulled out this powerful legal and, well, financial weapon to try and shut his enemies down. It was a strategy that was about to backfire big time. He used this thing called an act of attainder, and you have to understand how incredibly brutal this was. It was basically a form of legal death. Parliament could just declare you a traitor, no trial needed, and in a blink of an eye, you would lose everything. The consequences were just devastating. First, boom, all your lands, all your money seized by the crown. Then your titles were stripped away. 1 minute you're a lord, the next you're a nobody. And finally, you were declared an outlaw. That meant if anyone caught you, the penalty was death. It was just complete and total political and social annihilation. And this is where Henry made a huge miscalculation. Right in his very first parliament, he attainted Lovell and the Staffords. Now, he thought he was crushing them, taking away their power to cause any trouble. But what he actually did was make them desperate. By taking everything away, he left them with absolutely nothing to lose. And, from their point of view, everything to gain by rolling the dice on a rebellion. Now, where this rebellion actually kicked off is just as important as who was leading it. The geography of this whole uprising is like a treasure map of Yorkist loyalty. It proves this was just a direct continuation of the old war. So Lord Lovell doesn't just pop up randomly, he goes straight to the North Riding of Yorkshire, specifically around Middleham Castle. And why there? Because Middleham was Richard III's personal fortress, the very heart of his power base. Meanwhile, the Staffords are stirring up trouble in the Midlands, a region famous for its Yorkist sympathies, and they're using this potent rumor that their chosen replacement king, Warwick, had actually escaped from the Tower of London. And Henry VII was no dummy. He immediately got how dangerous this was. He didn't just send a general, he personally marched his own army north, straight to the city of York. He knew that if that symbolic heart of the north fell to the rebels, his new reign could just totally collapse before it even really got started. So this was it. This was the first real test of Henry Tudor's kingship. Was he going to hesitate? Was he going to try and negotiate? Or was he going to act with the kind of speed and ruthlessness you need to hold on to a throne you won with blood? The rebellion just fell apart with incredible speed. It barely even lasted a month. The second Henry marched north in late April, Lovell's support just evaporated. The king was smart. He offered pardons to all the regular soldiers, and Lovell's army just melted away without a single fight. The Staffords held on a little bit longer, but by the middle of May, the whole thing was over. And we actually know from sources written at the time just how high the stakes really were. A contemporary account, the Croyland Chronicle, tells us this wasn't just about raising an army. Lovell's first plan was to ambush and actually assassinate King Henry himself while he was in York. This wasn't just a rebellion, it was a plot for regicide. So, what was the final score? Well, for the rebels, it was a complete disaster. Lovell managed to escape to Europe, but the Stafford brothers weren't so lucky. They tried to claim sanctuary in a church, but Henry had them dragged out, which was a pretty controversial move, and Sir Humphrey was executed for treason. For the king, though, a huge success. He had shown everyone who was boss and made his throne that much more secure. But the most important thing to come out of all this was the precedent it set. Henry's victory sent this crystal-clear, ice-cold message to anyone else thinking about starting trouble. He was fast, he was decisive, and he was absolutely ruthless. This really became the blueprint for how he would handle every single challenge to his crown for the rest of his reign. So Henry had crushed the first echo of the Wars of the Roses. He had proven he was a force to be reckoned with. But the Yorkist cause wasn't dead, not by a long shot, and Lord Lovell was still out there plotting. The first battle of his reign was won, sure, but it left this lingering question in the air: how many more ghosts and how many more pretenders would rise up from the past before the Tudor dynasty was ever truly safe?